everybody, I'm Conquering History Games, and welcome to a new campaign on the channel. Today we're going to be spending some time in the world of Kaiserreich with this campaign, specifically Moereich Beta 0.16.1. And I was kind of inspired to do today's campaign for a variety of reasons. I guess kind of first and foremost, I had been thinking recently, and I was talking about it in a stream this morning, a lot of the stuff that I'm going to talk about today, I was bringing up at the start of, or I was bringing up during a stream today. But let's just jump in here, because I kind of feel that the menu music's a little bit loud and I can't really think. So give me a second here. All right, we're in. Hindsight is 2020. Let's shut the music off for a second and talk about who I'm playing and why. So, today we're going to be playing as the Patagonian Workers' Front, which is a really interesting country that, from what little I know of it, and I'm actually trying to go into this as blind as possible, and I'm going to be doing some interesting things along the way. First off, what's the goal here? I don't know. Maybe we'll try to take over South America. Maybe we'll help the Third International win the Second World War. I'm not entirely sure, because I'm trying to go in relatively blind, so I don't know what kind of expansionist policies that we're actually going to have available to us. And of course, you never know what kind of political paths other countries in the world, or in your continent even, are going to take. So I don't know if Brazil is going to end up joining the Third International, and then we can't help, we can't invade them or whatever. I don't know. But at least, for sure, we are going to unite Argentina. So, what inspired me to do today's campaign? Well, it was a few reasons. One is, I've been playing a lot of the New Order lately, and I do enjoy that mod, do not get me wrong, but I've been noticing a trend in sort of the, I guess you could say, broader Hearts of Iron 4 community, that people are becoming more interested in what the new hotnesses are, the New Order, 1,000-Week Reich, regular Kaiserreich. They're like, oh, there's not anything interesting in there. I've got to play Kaiserreich Redo. I got to play KX. And I think that we've kind of come as a society, really as a community, I think that people are just taking for granted that Kaiserreich is still here. It's still strong. It's still great. So somebody did say in the stream this morning, well, there hasn't been a major update in a little while. Maybe that's why it's not really on people's radar. Possibly that's why. But I wanted to do some Kaiserreich. So why am I doing Patagonian Workers' Front in particular? Well, one of the things I think Kaiserreich does quite well that I would easily say most mods don't do nearly as well is there's a very vibrant and active activity in South America, also in Africa for that matter, but we're going to be playing in South America. I also have been wanting to play the Patagonian Workers' Front specifically because of some generals who we're going to be getting access to. I was kind of thinking about it when back in February we did the Watch Along where we saw the Girls und Panzer film, which I think you guys are getting where I'm going with this. So there's some interesting characters down here. It's and also it's a leftist path. They have several leftist possibilities that they could go down here, and I'm not sure which one I want to do. And in fact, what I decided to do, this was something that was once suggested to me by an in real life friend about a concept that I could do during a leftist playthrough. And what I'm going to be doing is, for certain decisions, I'm going to be random number generating my responses. So I'm gonna pull up a random number generator in the other monitor. I'm gonna roll it from 1 to 4 or however many options I get, and I'll pull it over into the screen so you guys can see it, so you guys know that it's legit, that I'm not making things up. It's just oh wow, the random number generator landed syndicalist every time. Wow. Because I thought it would be fun to do something that's not min-maxy, so to speak. Could be a little bit different. And it'll kind of symbolize the chaos in a leftist movement in the Kaiserreich world. Especially when as vibrant as what's going on here in Patagonia. Now, I will admit that my knowledge of history in South America is relatively limited. I have spent a fair amount of time studying Peru and Brazil, but outside of that, my knowledge steeply drops off. And Argentina is perhaps the most egregious example of that. Like, I swear I know more about the history of Uruguay than Argentina. Argentina, I know relatively little. It's not really my area of expertise. So we're not going to be getting as much of me not pontificating, but me expositing on a historical context and stuff. But what I am going to be doing is pointing out, talking about certain generals in particular. I'll probably do a general every episode, kind of like I did for my Black Revolt campaign in Hearts of Iron 4 Kaiserreich Redo, funnily enough. So anyway, I've been chit-chatting enough. Let's turn the music back on and get to it. Let's take a look at what we are. We're the Patagonian Workers' Front. Let's take a look at our leader here first. Actually, no, before I do anything, let's introduce all of our favorite characters. They're certainly mine here. So, first off, played by the one and only Katyusha from Pravada Academy in today's campaign, we have Field Marshal Mikhail Tukachevsky, which is probably my favorite Russian name of all time to pronounce. It's just so fun. Tukachevsky. Could just say it all day. It's got some bounce to it. Anyway, so before we read his bio, because I think people forget that generals have bios in here, let's talk about who Tukachevsky was in real life. So we'll pull her up for here. So in real life, Tukachevsky. Let's take a look at the whole thing. Like, what I'm going to be doing is going into our Russian exiles that are here in Patagonia. So I'm sure that anybody watching this already knows the Kaiserreich lore. Russia did not become the Soviet Union in this timeline. They lost the Russian Civil War. So here we have Russian exiles who are in Patagonia helping us out right now. Indicated by here, a military leader forced to flee Russia after the failure of its revolution. Their loyalty is to the socialist ideals, led them to serving the Internationale, perhaps hoping for the slightest chance of seeing a red Russia arise. Now, I'm not 100% sure how this works, because I think there has been a couple of updates to when this concept was initially introduced, but they can and will probably leave. Yeah, they definitely will leave, if for no other reason than when the Commune of France goes to war with Germany, they're going to go there. But there are supposed to be other circumstances in which they can leave. So, for example, if a second Russian Civil War breaks out, which has become very common, at least the last few times I've been playing Kaiserreich, they'll go and they'll try to help the Red Army out there and things like that. So they're going to leave at one point or another, hopefully later rather than sooner, for our own sake. I guess I could have gone to the settings and set it so that the Russian Civil War wouldn't happen, but that's part of the game, right? Okay, so Mikhail Tukachevsky, who is he / she? So the real Tukachevsky was born, of course, in Russia to a family of actual nobles, but they were very poor, so it was one of those things where they had titles, not so much though having money. He then served in World War I, which I'm trying to remember how old he was when World War I broke out. He was pretty young. I think he was still a teenager. He might have even... No, he didn't. I was going to say he might have lied about his age to get in, but he was very young. He might have been like 19 or something. Anyway, so he fought during World War I, ends up getting captured in 1915, and goes to a POW camp, where he repeatedly escapes from. Incidentally, if you want to see a good movie about escaping from World War, or just like not escaping, well, sort of a little bit about escaping, but just being in a German POW camp, there's a classic movie called The Grand Illusion. It's a French film. It's in black and white. It's about that. I highly recommend it. Anyway, so he's constantly escaping from these POW camps, and eventually they send him to a special camp in a fortress in Bavaria for people who are constantly trying to escape. And there, he apparently meets a journalist, a French journalist called Remy Raure. I'm so bad with the French, but anyway, the two of them spent a fair amount of time together. Also, allegedly, Charles de Gaulle was there, so Charles de Gaulle and Tukachevsky knew one another, which is, where's that interesting alternate history scenario where they become like best friends in a POW camp, and then you get some sort of... Well, we're going to get into some... I'm just going to say some things that are less known about Tukachevsky that allegedly come from when he knew this journalist in the POW camp. All I'm going to say is that there's a lot of fodder for alternate history there. I'm not a modder. Somebody out there go take care of it. So, when Tukachevsky was in the POW camp, he would talk about things with Remy, including allegedly how he hated Jews and Christians and socialists, and he wanted a return to like a barbaric Russia, and so he also, like, Remy, the French journalist, alleges that at one point he found Tukachevsky carving an idol, and like an idol, and it was of Perun, the Slavic god, and he was just ranting about how, like, oh, I hate modernism and I hate modern civilization, and Marxism's not good either, and we need a return to paganism. And so, like, there's supposed to be testimonies from a couple of other prisoners that he said this thing, but I don't know. It's a little weird. It definitely didn't appear to influence him later in life, or at least not a whole lot. So, anyway, he eventually gets out of the POW camp and joins the Bolsheviks. This is a few years later, which was also interesting that he joined the Bolsheviks, considering that he was, descended from nobility. So he had a lot of responsibilities during the Russian Civil War. He defended Moscow, and he also took part in a lot of very important campaigns. So, for example, he was behind the taking of Siberia from Kolchak. He also was in the Crimean campaign in the 1920s, where he defeated General Denikin, who's one of the potential leaders of Russia in Kaiserreich, actually, unless they change something. But he's at least around for a little bit. He suppressed rebellions. He very famously was part of the repelling of Polish forces that went into the Ukraine, and then he counterattacked into Poland, but then he was defeated at the Vistula. He argued that it was not his fault, that it was Stalin's fault, because even back then they knew each other and were rivals. So, then we move forward into the 1920s once the Soviet Union has been established. He is one of the original marshals in the Red Army. And he had very harsh words for how the army was organized. And he wanted, he just basically wanted to modernize the army, improve communications, combined arms tactics, usage of deep battle, and things like that. And eventually, him and Stalin continued to have a rivalry for many years, even though Stalin eventually did get on his side in terms of needing to industrialize the military. They still had personal problems. Anyway, eventually, he becomes, he's the marshal of one of the marshals of the Soviet Union. He's traveling around the world, or at least Europe. He's going to the United Kingdom, into France, into Germany. He's trying to learn things. But at this point, Stalin is in power. He, excuse me. I had something caught in my throat. Stalin decides to, have the Great Purge begins. Stalin has, his little bullshit fake trial, and he says that Tukachevsky is a Trotskyist. They arrest him one day. They have the trial that day. He's declared guilty that day, and they shoot him in the head that same day in 1937. And so that's the end of it. Well, except not really, because then the rest of Tukachevsky's family ends up getting killed, including like his wife and his brothers and things like that. Just Stalin things. All right, so oh my gosh, I just realized how long I've already been recording. We're almost halfway through the episode. Let me try. Oh shoot, we've had the music off. I'm sorry. Come on, play, damn it. Anyway, so let's talk about who our other Russian exiles here are. Well, played by Clara from Pravda Academy, we have here Vasily Chuikov, which those of you who play in China and Vanilla have probably heard about this person. So Chuikov, once again, another Soviet military commander. Did not fight in World War II, to my knowledge. He was too young, but he was also a factory worker from the time he was a child, so that was also keeping him busy. He ends up joining the Red Army. Clara does here, and Clara Chuikov. And after the revolution, joins a military academy and becomes an officer, and eventually goes off to China, where he is an attaché to the forces there. He's then called back to take part in the invasion of Poland in 1939, because remember, Germany invades Poland, starts World War II, but the Soviet Union also invades a couple of weeks later, and yet is not declared on by the United Kingdom and France. What's up with that? Now, that's a whole other thing. Anyway, so then he fights in Poland. He takes part in the fighting in Finland. He then is sent back to China once again to continue helping out the nationalists develop their army. And then he's called back again when the war with Germany starts. And then his most famous moment of his career is when he takes part in the defense of Stalingrad, which is not called as such in this in Kaiserreich. And this is like where he achieves all his fame. Or at least the most of his fame, where because he just decides to adopt the tactic of getting right up against the German lines, making it a really nasty slugfest in there, until the counterattack happens, where they're able to surround the German army and lead it to surrendering. He then was part of Operation Bagration, which I'm never entirely sure how to pronounce that word, but I think it's Bagration. But of course, that is the biggest, I would argue even more so than Stalingrad, just this enormous Soviet offensive where they just take back huge swathes of lands in Eastern Europe and break the backs of Germany in the East. And then it's pretty much just, it's academic from that point. And he also is the one who accepts the surrender of Germany on May 2nd, 1942, or at least in Berlin. Did I say 1942? 1945, excuse me. And then after that, he has a very long, distinguished career that's basically just in peacetime for the rest of his life until he dies in the 80s, when he was in his 80s himself. So he had a pretty good life, and he's actually, I could be wrong about this, but I believe that he is actually buried in at the Stalingrad memorial, where that huge statue with the woman, and like she's carrying the sword. I forget what her name is. The name of the huge statue. It's like one of the largest statues in the world. Anyway, so that's Clara, aka Chuikov here. And then finally we have the man, everybody who's watched Death of Stalin loves him, and plenty who haven't do as well, Georgy Zhukov, played by Nona from Pravda, here in from the School of Pravda in today's campaign. So, Georgy Zhukov, God, where do I begin with him? Peasant, very, very poor peasant, who rises to the peaks of, being the head of the Soviet army. So also fought in World War I. I'm going to try to speed things up here. Fought in World War I, fought in the Russian Civil War, and then he is eventually given command of the army that is facing against the Japanese in the 1930s, defeats the Japanese at the Battle of Khalkhin Gol, which is kind of a lesser known event, but it's sort of the battle where the Japanese go, okay, maybe we don't want to mess with the Soviets, and so they don't get involved. And this could be argued to be one of the reasons, because then the Soviet Union can concentrate on fighting Germany in the West, which helps them hang on, because it was a very close cut thing in 41. Defeating the Germans. And so, if the Russians didn't feel relatively confident that Japan wasn't coming off of them, they wouldn't be able to transfer so many forces to the West. So he ends up becoming the chief of staff of the entire Soviet army. But then Germany invades, and Stalin gets pissed and takes that away from him. But so then Zhukov kind of has to like reclimb his way through the ranks. Aids in the defense of Leningrad, longest siege in human history, or at least the bloodiest siege, I should say. It's not the long. It kind of depends on what you define as a siege. We're going to say it's the bloodiest siege in human history. Aids in the defense of Leningrad, aids in the defense of Moscow, is crucial in winning the Battle of Stalingrad. Also plans the Battle of Kursk, which was the follow-up, sort of, in a way, to the Battle of Stalingrad, which was sort of the last German offensive on the Eastern Front. He helps win on that. He's the brains behind Operation Bagration, which I talked about before, which is when they just decisively pushed the Germans back, and then that's all she wrote for the war, pretty much. Let's see. Also was part of the Vistula offensive here in Poland. Takes charge of the Battle of Berlin, which is when Nazi Germany is definitively defeated and it's officially over. And then, of course, later starred in the movie Death of Stalin and was played by Jason Isaacs, which I think is perhaps the greatest of his accomplishments. That's Nona here as Zhukov. So, what about in real life here? Goodness gracious, we are like 20 minutes in. It wouldn't be a Conquering History Games campaign if I didn't not unpause until the video was already not unpause in the first one. So let's just go into their bios here. I'm probably just going to read the parts where there's deviation. So pretty much the same thing here. Rising in rank, associate to Trotsky, became a general, led one of the finest units. Here we go. Alongside several high-ranking Bolsheviks and Red Army leaders, Tukachevsky escaped to France, a nation he was already familiar with, and offered his service to the newly established commune. In the following years, he dedicated his time to essay after essay on the reforms which he believed the French army needs. His close associates said that he owns over 100 volumes on military tactics and has read every single one. Tukachevsky expressed dismay at the decentralized structure of the Syndicalist commune, believing it unfit for modern warfare, and proposed the creation of a unified, centralized apolitical army instead. Because of this, he came into constant conflict with the Faure government, but the CGT could not simply remove him from the academy. Even they understood that Tukachevsky was the best general which the Internationale has available. To resolve this, he and the other Bolsheviks were sent to Patagonia to lead a military mission to help the Argentinian Revolution. Alright, now, Chuikov. Right here. Born into nothing, impoverished peasant. Became a company commander. He only has one path left to pursue. Joined the Bolshevik remnants, enrolled for officer training, become a commander in the French army. Close associate of Mikhail Tukachevsky, he was assigned to the International mission to Patagonia, where he hopes to prove his worth. And then, of course, moving back here to Georgy Zhukov. And then we've got... here, Zhukov's service was rather brief. Once the Soviet regime collapsed, he escaped his homeland with numerous other Red Army commanders and landed in France. Getting accustomed to a completely foreign country was difficult, but Zhukov had fully dedicated himself to the Bolshevik course by then and pushed forward with dedication. He completed officer training, maintained contact with Mikhail Tukachevsky, studied modern strategy from his superior, and voluntarily joined the International mission to Patagonia. Dutifully loyal to the cause of the revolution, he is often seen as the most trustworthy and reliable of the Bolshevik quartet, even if his experience holds him back from promotions. Inexperience holds him back from promotions. And there you have it. That is all the Russian exiles that we have here. Wait, what? Joseph Duzgavli? Never heard of him. Alright, so let's figure out what our game plan here is. Well, first off, you gotta have the BFFs here, Katyusha and Clara working together. We're gonna go ahead and get ourselves on the border with Argentina and maybe stop talking about the Bolsheviks for 5 seconds and take a look at what the situation is down here in Argentina. So, first thing I want to do, I don't know what I want to do actually. Let's try to get some basic machine tools up and running. Industry is always good, and we'll do the mechanical engineering, but goodness gracious, this is just awful how few research slots that we have. So we have a fairly big tree here, but we don't have access to most of it right now, so obviously we're just going to have to take revolutionary fires. Despite the attempts of the Argentinian government to quell the flames of revolution, our movement is still alive and growing stronger by the day. While our victory is far from certain, we must start preparing for the final showdown against the reactionaries in the north. So give us war support, political power, and the national spirit, Patagonian resourcefulness, which grants consumer good factories minus 10%, max factories in a state plus 10%, military factory construction speed plus 20%. So all good stuff. And of course, you want to take a look at your national spirits, and we'll also read about it, Antonio Soto, here in a minute. But we got Patagonian resistance, which increases our Storlander limit by 15%, and our division limit goes up by 10%. We are an illegitimate republic, though, which hurts our daily political power gain and stability. Quite a bit, actually, with the stability. We're at negative 14 right now. No bueno. No bueno. We're only getting not even a third of a political power point a day. Now, who's this Antonio Soto that's in charge? Now, the Argentinians I'm going to be reading fully because I don't know them as well. Antonio Soto Canalejo was born in 1897 in the city of Ferrol, La Coruna, Spain, or La Corona, Coruna. No, it's Coruna. Yeah, that's like east of Madrid, right? Spain. His father died when he was very young, and he was forced to move to Argentina with his brother when he was just 13 years old. Already as a teenager, he was exposed to the anarchistic ideals by the people he met when he traveled with the Serrano Mendoza Traveling Theater Company. He participated in a series of trade employees strike of trade employees in Terlu Chubut province that turned into an open rebellion, with him fighting alongside the strikers. Although the revolt was crushed, he gained valuable experience for his future uprising. When the second Patagonic strike came about, after wealthy landlords decided to ignore the request that had been agreed between the strikers and the government, he decided to join up with the strikers and organize their insurrection. The strike led up to a standoff at the La Anita farm, where Soto rallied the disillusioned workers with a fiery speech and managed to hold back an army detachment force led by Lieutenant Colonel Varela. His forces began growing with simple workers who wanted better working conditions and eager idealists alike, slowly but steadily managing to drive the army to a stalemate until the affair became public and the government called off the military. El Gallego has become a legendary figure for the workers in the FOP and anarchists worldwide, and having allied with Emilio Lopez Arango in order to secure the stability of the United States of America, much is expected from the chairman for the following years. Okay, that was an awful lot for me to go through. So I think we might actually be able to unpause today. So we have no military factories, not good, but let's at least get some convoys going. And of course, we've got to change this coloring here. Let's go with that. I like that. That's like a deep burgundy wine. All right. Let's unpause! We did it, everyone! We did it! Conquering History Games unpaused a game in the first episode. They said it couldn't be done. They said it shouldn't be done. Also, other things that are not good right now. We have 0 manpower and only 1 factory. It's a naval dockyard. Alright. The Revolutionary Fires. Argentina was in a state of chaos during the Weltkrieg, with British companies exploiting its people and resources to get everything they could for the war. This led to unrest throughout the nation, but especially in the south of the country, in Patagonia, in the south of the country, in Patagonia. Extremely poor working conditions brought the rise of socialism and syndicalism, with thousands of people refusing to work and rioting through the streets. The British forced the Argentinian government to intervene, turning riots into rebellions during the events that led to the Semana Trágica. The situation only escalated further and further from there, with the LP growing in strength in the main cities, particularly with the Buenos Aires city oligarchy. However, deep in the south of Argentina, a new type of unrest grew. What started as a simple strike of rural workers became a general strike in the south, demanding for the payment of wages that had been due for months and the improvement of working conditions. Well, an agreement was reached at first with the creation of the first rural agreement of the Patagonia. When landowners didn't keep their promises, the workers started another general strike, forcing an armed retaliation by an expedition led by Lieutenant Colonel Hector Benigo Varela. The workers, trusting Varela after he helped create the first agreement, would try to negotiate with the officer, only to be met with a dreadful realization. Varela was there to demand nothing more than unconditional surrender of the strikers, and he was willing to shoot all who opposed to keep control of the Patagonia. A sad start for our revolution. Okay, let's give it a minute. Alright. Oh yeah, by the way, did I already mention this? We are an autonomous puppet of Chile. That's what's keeping us alive. And I'm going to be very straight up with you. What we might do is create a save file before the war with Argentina starts. Because for all we know, we might have to replay it. Because the AI is... you cannot win as Patagonia if Chile just collapses. This is how it works. Chile, aka South Texas. One of my favorite portraits in Moereich, by the way, with Marmaduke Grove here. Fantastic stuff. But... that's just how it is. Like we don't need them to win the war for us, but we need them to at least not completely collapse all on their own. So that's how it's going to go. Let's read this, and then we're going to call it a day. The workers rally behind the figure of Antonio Soto and Jose Facon Grande Font have decided that the time for revolution was now. Despite the disarmament clause in the original rural agreement, most of Soto's anarchists had left their weapons to Alfredo El Toscano Fonte, for after he and many other more radical anarchists refused the agreement, and so Soto found himself having to ally with the Patagonian bandit in order to get the equipment to arm the workers to fight. After the initial victories of the army, the workers dealt a decisive victory at La Anita Farm, and with the coordination of the FORA through telegraph lines and message runners, the second great Patagonic strike only grew and grew in strength, with the Argentine army being unable to deal with it without sparking heavy political backlash in the capital for the popular UCR in power. United workers will never be beaten. Okay, that's it for today. Thank you very much for joining me. I think this is going to be a very fun and interesting series, and there might also be a twist or two over the course of it that I have not mentioned, because I want you guys to be surprised by it when it happens. But I don't know. Maybe I shouldn't have even brought it up at all. But be sure to subscribe if you haven't already, and click the notification bell so you'll always be notified whenever a new video in this series goes up. I am Conquering History Games, and I will see you all next time. Take care.